So, welcome to Maintaining the Maintainers. This is the comedy section of the. No, it's not.
No.
Actually. No, this is actually very serious.
The comedy session was yesterday during rehearsal.
Right. We're here with Leander from Red Hat and Drees from Microsoft. I'm Goodman-Wilson. I'm on the developer relations team at GitHub, and all three of us care very deeply about open source from a very broad point of view. And we're all very interested in the institutions that support open source software and give it the space to grow. And so we're going to have a conversation today with these two about their experiences and their opinions and their predictions about how open source is going to grow over the next, say, 10 years, and the role that existing institutions will play in that growth, and the need for new institutions to sustain that growth. Yeah. So, Rain, why don't you say just a little bit about yourself and how you got into open source, just quickly.
But I want to add to that, and that is that even though we're going to have a conversation between the three of us today, we would really appreciate your feedback after. And especially if you want to write a response to things that we say or add to the things that we say, that is the most important thing for me.
That's true. We're not just up here lecturing, we're up here starting a conversation.
Yeah.
And that includes you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we would like to start a conversation. So I'm Rain with Red Hat, and you may have heard of us. I'm a cloud community liaison with OpenStack, and so the project is a massive umbrella, and I am officially in the midstream project called RDO between OpenStack and the Red Hat product, but because the midstream product is affected by both upstream as well as product and customers and partners, I have to listen both ways all the time.
So my name is Flora. I work with Microsoft since 3 months, so it's quite new still for me. I come from open source and startups. I used to live in Austria for 8 years, and I've lived in Berlin actually for a year, working for a startup that built on top of the pivotal Cloud Foundry platform. And yeah, now I'm a developer product marketing manager for Microsoft Azure. And it's a whole new team in Western Europe. And I have very smart colleagues that I love working with. My first steps in open source, because I think that was part of the question, right, is when I started learning to code myself 9 years ago, and I went through the Rails Girls guides because I was in a company back then that was very much building on top of Ruby and Ruby on Rails. And just that all of the material was open source, and I could just go in there and follow it by my own pace, and then started organizing Rails Girls workshops and adding to the guides. And those were sort of my first steps, and they were so positive. The experience was so positive that I never left again.
I forgot to say my first steps in open source. Yeah. I'm officially a friend. So in my undergrad is in dance, and my master's is in IT. And while I was getting my undergrad in dance, a very close friend of mine was getting his computer science degree. And he said, hey, this really exciting company just started. It's called Red Hat, and it does open source. And I was like, that's nice. And it was literally a 10-minute conversation. And then a few years later, I was to the same friend, hey, I'd like to earn a little extra cash. Can I work in the computer labs? I am technical. And he goes, oh, yeah. And so I used to do Windows support that was mostly turn it off and turn it back on again. And then randomly go work in the Linux labs. And then
we're told to be moving apart a little bit more, because I think we're
reverberating.
I don't like you as much now.
So, was too close anyway.
Okay. And Oh, so my partner went to Duke University, which is in Durham, North Carolina, and when we moved there, I kind of went, ooh, I have no idea what those symbols mean. What? A little louder.
Talking really quietly.
Okay. Basically, we moved to North Carolina. I kind of checked the requirements, and they always included Linux. And then one year, when I happened to be looking for a job, and they removed the Linux requirement, I applied, because I had Windows support and technical support and no open source support whatsoever. And they were like, yeah, we'll try. And I inhaled it within 30 days. I had my CE. And then 10 years later,
Here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are. So, looking forward to the next 10 years then, what do you see as the biggest barrier?
Introduce yourself.
Well, I
He
did.
did,
I'm Don
kind of.
And
Goodman-Wilson.
also first steps in open
First
source.
steps in open source. I've been consuming open source since Slackware 0.9 something, which was distributed on 170 floppy disks and took all night to install. Good times. Most of my open source involvement is in model railroading.
I just wanted to say, right?
Yeah, I like toy trains. They're a lot of fun. There's a lot of very interesting engineering challenges there, and there's a very dedicated group of people working to overcome these challenges, and they're using the open source development model. And it's super fun. It's crazy, weird networking protocols and stuff like that. Micro miniature electronics. And so I did that for a while, and then I got a real job. Because it wasn't paying the bills, because,
Weird.
Look, there's 6 of us, right? We're very passionate. They're going to kill me if they see this.
Yeah, you're going to have to share.
But yeah, so now, then I ended up doing a philosophy degree. And now I'm really interested in broader questions of the foundations of open source. What makes a movement successful? What does that movement need to thrive and grow? Hence my next question.
Which is?
Which is, over the next 10 years, what do you see as the biggest barriers to the growth of open source?
I love how they're both looking at me like.
Way to feign surprise. Excellent. Good acting.
Well, I think it's super interesting, at least that there's new stakeholders, right, in the ecosystem, and they're more visible than they've ever been before. I think it was the Octoverse where we saw that Microsoft is actually the biggest contributor to open source. And I know that 5 years ago, if anyone would have told me that today I'd be working at Microsoft, I would be like, no. Yeah, here I am, and it's really an integral part to what Microsoft does and stands for. And they've also been playing a huge part in open source. And I think, we could do better, and there's a lot of institutions that could be doing better, but they just need to learn how. And I think that's what we want to be talking about.
So I feel like the biggest blocker over the next 10 years is going to be not adapting to change and trying to do what you've always done because you've always done it. And so evolving is key, and then also actually listening to the community. And then third, burnout. Burnout is a blocker. So we're still passionate, but that could change if we're working full time, if we're doing our day job, but then also at night coding and contributing and doing that. And I realize that there are a lot of people out there who are not open source contributors for their day jobs, but they feel passionate, and so they have this 9 to 5, 40 hours a week or more or less, and then they also contribute after work. And actually, when the GitHub supports was announced, my initial reaction was sponsors.
Yes.
Yeah. Sponsors.
Sponsors. Yeah.
That was awesome. The idea of that is awesome, but also in the back of my head, because it's something on my mind, burnout is, I think, okay, yeah, but doesn't that also encourage less of a work-life balance for people who
Because you feel like you have a responsibility to the people that are backing you?
Yeah, I immediately was like, wait, what about balance? What about mental health? What about burnout? So that's on my mind, but you can tell where I am.
No, that's,
So-
no, go ahead.
No, I think it's, yeah, so yeah, I understand where you're coming from. At least it's a way where people can work on open source full-time. They have the opportunity to maybe be able to work full-time on open source. So that's for sustainability, I think, a good thing. Open source project, so companies could support the open source projects that they depend upon, right, and just give back to the community in a different way than sort of gobbling up some of these open source companies that they've been doing, which is not the best solution because it's usually they then end up in this whole corporate machine where the corporate machine should actually be working for them, right, because corporates are very good at a couple of things like HR and marketing and PR, and they should be working with these projects and helping them with all of these abilities that they have, and not have them become a cog in the machine. Because, yeah. I also feel like, I mean, who as a child dreamt to become a open source maintainer? I think no one. It's something that happens to you, and if you need all the help that you can get because you don't have all of the skill sets that are needed for an open or a software project to thrive.
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting, actually. So do you see then an increase in the rate of burnout, an increase in the risk of burnout in a project?
Absolutely. I have been the OpenStack community liaison for only 2 years. Before that, I was a full-time Python engineer within the same project. And in the last single year, there have been a rather large number of engineers either switch projects within the company or leave the company completely in different ways. And that's not good. I mean, Red Hat does very good. I have been sick before, and Red Hat has supported my recovery and whatnot, but it really depends on who your manager is and what department and what country you live in. Yeah, I have. And one person burning out from something that could be just them, it could be the project, it could be something else, it could be the manager, it could be like any number of factors. But then you have 2 people burn out within the same project within a very short span. That's coincidence. And then 3 people, that becomes a pattern. And that means something needs to change.
Mm-hmm. So historically, this will tie in, but there's a little bit of a roundabout here. Historically, there have been 2 very large institutions, right, that supported open source software, the Free Software Foundation and the Open Source Initiative, right? And they both had goals around legitimizing open source as a bona fide development model, right, and creating corporate acceptance, especially in the OSI's case of open source. What kinds of institutions are we missing that could help address this problem that you raise of increasing rates of burnout and increasing sense of not having enough time or opportunity to continue maintaining the software that you do?
Or resources.
Could be resources, could be corporate structures, it could be systematic incentives.
Right now, there are a couple of topics that are hotter to a lot of people, and one is diversity, and the other is work-life balance and preventing burnout. I've noticed in the past 3 years or so, and I feel like that is great. Like that acknowledgement that there is a need for diversity, there is a need for a focus on yourself, right? Not just on the code, the company, the project. And so that's already started happening, but there's not a institution that is officially being like, you know what, I'm going to focus. There are little institutions that focus on mental health or this
Diversity.
specific diversity demographic or whatnot, but there's not one that's like the equivalent of OSI. There's no single company that's like shouting, I'm going to do this.
Which is maybe not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a good thing that it's a little bit scattered.
Yeah.
And that you have Rails Girls Summer of Code that helps provide scholarships for women to work on open source projects. And that you have, I don't know, CNCF that helps community organizers to organize their conferences. I mean, maybe it's a good thing that support is like...
Grassroots.
Thank you.
Spread out.
I was looking for that word.
Yeah. Frankly, I think that the community is key. Like, if the community is silent, then institutions and companies and projects can do whatever they want. But if the community demands X, Y, Z, or says, this is what's important to me as an individual, and Flora comes along and is like, that's important to me too, and you come along and you say, that's important to me too, then we've developed a voice together. And to me, it's not about the institutions, like, yay for making open source relevant, yay Red Hat, sure. But I'm more interested in encouraging the people.
So for my own part, I think institutions can be formal, they can be informal, right? And so I think community is a form of institution, right? It's just not a formalized version of it. So that's, I mean, for me, that's very, very interesting to hear. As a community of practice, those of us who are maintaining open source, we do open source, right? And at one point in time, that had very, very specific meaning, right? That was tied to a political ideology. It was tied to a legal framework for creating licenses that ensured that certain conditions were met. Over the past 10 years and looking forward to the next 2 years, how has the practical definition of open source as we as practitioners use it, how has that changed? Like, I can think of some examples of my own, but I'd really like to hear it from you.
You're a full panel member now. We're just the three of us, not four of us. So go for it.
You're a full panel. You're one of us.
I don't want it to be a leading question. Okay, so for example, there are a number of open source projects maintained by larger corporations that are, mainly used for recruiting, right?
For example.
Meaningful looks. Subtitle.
Anything DevOps related. No, not anything DevOps related, but you see a lot of them, right? You go. I don't want to name names, and I don't think it's a bad thing either, right? Like, but it's a very different purpose, right? It's not about freeing software and the freedom to do as you want with the software. Now it's a marketing tool, right? It's something that lots of people can participate in. And in virtue of that, you can identify community leaders and then recruit them, right? So that's one way that I think it's evolved. No judgment on whether that's good or bad. Another way that it's evolved is that, for example, some projects, and again, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to do that. I don't want to judge. Offer their software as open source, but they're not looking for active contributors, right? They're putting it out there because they want to meet a certain legal requirement, or they have a certain set of legal goals associated with having the source open, right, as a tool to prevent certain things from happening. But it's not open source because they want other people contributing to it, right? So they're using the legal framework for the, different ends,
yeah,
right? But as practitioners of open source, for example, how important is license choice to you? Well, just as an example.
To me?
Yeah, to you, because you're on the panel too.
Some opensource.com kind of took the essence of open source and defined it a little bit more specifically, that it has to be dynamic, receive feedback in kind of the prototype model, that it needs to be public, that there needs to be maintainers, don't quote me. Good thing this isn't recording. and that opened it up to be about government or cities or healthcare or so many other things than software. And part of that key between proprietary and open source is the license, but frankly, the licenses don't cover every use case, every possible use case in the world. We were talking last night, and we brought up, what about when someone wants to put their project online, have it be open source, get other contributors, like tick all the boxes, except they're worried about inventing dynamite that is then taken and used to kill people. And why isn't there a license for that specific use case? Like, that's only one example, and frankly, I don't know why there's not a license for that. Probably because if that code is out there, then
the code is out there.
It's still out there, yeah. And that's still a risk. Like why do people jump out of perfectly good airplanes? Because of the adrenaline rush. There's things are still going to happen.
I can't comment on that, not having jumped out of an airplane.
Okay.
But no, I think that's a very good point, right? And a very strict reading, like putting those sorts of restrictions on software is no longer open source, right? Nevertheless, I think there is a growing sense among certain segments that there are ethical concerns, that there is a different set of moral assumptions that underlying why they're creating this, and it's not about the freedom to do with it as you like, but it's something else, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is. But it's about sharing, it's about community building, but it's also about doing good in the world, yeah. Right? And not just releasing things willy-nilly, but thinking carefully and conscientiously about what the code gets used for. And there's a tension there, I think, that is not currently addressed by the existing institutions that we have because they're focused on a different set of philosophical principles, right? Which is why, you know the next question, right? Like, to the extent that open source is changing, like, should we be looking to support these new ways of doing things and formalizing these kinds of practices the way that free software and open source in the strict OSI sense of it have been formalized, right, to support and legitimize those use cases? Not necessarily from a license point of view, but just broadly.
Right. Generally.
Speaking.
Yeah. I think there's also still a lot of, there's a huge awareness campaign still to happen. I think one of the sessions in the Learn track upstairs was about the open source program office enterprises, because still within an enterprise, there's, even if Microsoft adopts open source, it's not like the whole organization understand what that even means. And those are programs that are very important still. To have a look at.
And I think it's important to understand yourself. Where is your line? Red Hat might call me more naked than transparent, because my line is a little bit more transparent than Red Hat as a company can afford to be. But that's my line, and I know where my line is, and so I am willing to do X, Y, Z, and if something comes along that is gray, I have to examine that and see if it's within my line. And institutions have to do that too. And if they...
And there should be room for that.
Yeah, but I also feel like open source has become too broad, like...
It means many things to many people.
Yes.
Do we need new terms?
Yes.
What does a post-open source world look like? Or better yet, what do we call it?
They're zombies. No.
What?
No, not post-apocalyptic.
Oh, sorry.
Those are just the projects that have been abandoned. And,
Open source is not the apocalypse. I don't know, actually. I've been searching for terms, but I don't know.
Well, hopefully we'll be
like,
around, and we'll hear from these smart people.
Yeah.
So we've talked about briefly, like creating ethical frameworks for people who are concerned about the ethical consequences of their software, right? We've talked a bit about the way that open source is used for marketing purposes, right, or strictly legal purposes. We've even talked a little bit about diversity and inclusion in open source communities. I'd like to circle back around to that for just a moment, right, because I think sustaining the growth of open source requires bringing more people in, right? Yeah. We have to bring more people in. And the only way that we're going to get more people in is if we move beyond white dudes.
Hi, white dude.
Yeah. I want less of me and more not me, right? Can we do that? You mentioned grassroots campaigns as a way of doing that. But, I mean, what other options do we have? Like, how can we create a culture where that's the norm?
Well, right now, I really like like the Google protests and people
walkout.
Yeah, the walkout. People are complaining loudly and publicly, and that's fucking awesome. Yes, more, yes, and that's something that we do as individuals, but also having an institution publicly step forward and be like, you know what, anyone that wants to anonymously step forward, we will protect you and we'll get your story out there. That would be nice too. But it's not just, because it seems like there's a focus maybe just on skin color or sex right now. And it's not just gender and race. It's age and cultural background and
ability
and economic. So much of diversity, and frankly, I've picked a couple that I fight for, and then I get behind other people who fight for things. Yeah, that's why the pronoun sticker. By the way, I always have the alternative pronoun stickers, is because that's my fight. That's what I fight for, is non-binary recognition. But what was the question?
No, this is great. This is great. Like, how do we normalize this sort of attitude?
Well,
so
we
pronoun
talk about
stickers,
it.
That's a good one.
We
right?
talk
we
about
talk
it.
About it.
The other thing I fight for is destigmatizing words.
Destigmatization.
English is hard. Destigmatization.
How do you say that in Dutch?
Destigmatisatie?
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know.
To making mental illness more normal. Normalizing.
That's a good one.
Mental illness. And so I talk about it on my blog. I will talk about my mental illnesses. I have PTSD and depression, and I take medication for it. And I think it, like, 5 years ago, the audience would have been like, and maybe inside you feel like that right now, but I think like someone in this audience just heard that and went, oh, okay, cool, and like feels better, and that's important. Like that's how I fight. That is an individual fight. But what about you?
No, but I also think like part of bigger corporations and so on embracing open source and trying to empower open source is that they have policies for these type of things, and they have processes for these type of things, and that's one of the really good examples of what they can introduce to open source to make it a bit more inclusive and diverse. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Cool. So last question then is I want to talk a little bit about Mainteneurs. Simply because...
What is that?
What is that?
Tell us about this
thing.
thing.
So funny you ask. Mainteneurs is an organization for maintaining maintainers, for creating a forum for discussion of the issues and problems that maintainers face and working to solve them together. It's a conference that's met 3 times, I think. Another meeting is tomorrow. There'll be more over the course of the year. We're going to find out tomorrow really what what developer or what maintainers,
Who's
what
going?
problems maintainers
Who's
are
going?
facing.
Show of hands.
Yeah, who's going to maintain? Yeah,
Totally can't see.
those are my favorite people in the audience.
Nice.
Also, it's sold out, so sorry if you didn't raise your hand.
It'll come back around. But what would your advice be to maintainerati? Like, moving forward, what would you recommend that we do, that we focus on to be most effective? You have an opinion. Floor.
Well, so, I mean, Don, you have supported me in the organizing the ROSCONF conferences, which are Ruby open source software conferences where most of the time of the day is actually solely dedicated to finding new long-term contributors for open source projects, which is super beneficial for everyone attending. And we did interviews with all of the maintainers. And the thing that they struggled with most, or like most of their challenges, had all to do with people management and how do you respond to issues, and do I need to respond to issues? How much time can I take until I respond to an issue, and why is everyone looking at me to respond to like a shitstorm happening in the community? And so that's something that maintainers apparently need to. It's a cry for help, if you ask me, and so that will be a topic that should be addressed much more than it is now.
And I think that if Maintainer-Rowdy wants to gain momentum, it needs to be documented more. And then, because I know as part of Maintainer-Rowdy, there is someone that takes notes. And then those notes are gathered, and then
They disappear?
In the past, historically, unfortunately, and sadly,
Archived.
yes.
So
But now we have an anthropologist.
exactly, there's a single person, which is
It's
called
not
a
me.
single point of failure, who will take notes and then get them online and published. And there needs to be more writers, frankly.
We have 10 for tomorrow.
Okay, great.
And an anthropologist to process and analyze the data.
Exactly.
All right.
And so to
Solved.
me, documentation solves so much.
This is seriously not a leading question. We actually hadn't discussed this before. Advice taken. Time machine used. I've altered the past. Great.
I mean, you talk to a lot of maintainers as well, right? At the last year's Juruko conference, which is also a Ruby conference, sorry for like going on about Ruby all the time. You interviewed a couple of maintainers as well. Did you also ask them about their challenges? I bet you do.
Well, for me, that was the very beginning of this project, and I hadn't really started thinking about the challenges so much as just like, well, what if we just had a platform for people to sort of get on a soapbox and talk about whatever's on their mind, which is frequently like, hey, my project is awesome and nobody's heard of it. And it sort of transformed into, hey, my project is awesome and nobody's heard of it and I need help. And then lights start to go on like, oh, I see. And let's focus more on the problems that you're having and talk about that because, I mean, people love to complain. I love to complain. So from those initial interviews, I didn't get much, but it did sort of orient me in the direction of asking these sorts of questions. What is your biggest pain point? I mean, money, frankly, is the response that comes back. So I'm very happy to see sponsors, but I think it's not just the availability of money, but the availability of viable business models. And I think one possible function is the creation of like a business model advisory group. I don't know, like that tells you, oh, so this is what your project looks like. Here's a range of viable business models that have worked in the past that you can try out for your own if you want to monetize it. It's a thought. I don't know if that's what people want or not, but
An open office.
an open
Like
office.
not a physical open office. That layout is bullshit. A open office hours, an office hours.
Office hours.
Kind of thing where people can talk to a coach.
Mentorship.
Yeah. Just like I would like to market I don't know what license to choose. I would like more people to come to my meetup. How do I use social media? Just and that wasn't America centric, but available.
As an American,
in
I can't
APAC.
see this if it is.
APAC, Europe, go Europe, and NASA hours. So You ready to start that? Actually, we're all European based, so.
But yes, I'm ready to start. Cool. Well, our time is up. Thank you so much for joining me on the stage to talk about this. If you all want to talk about this, we should talk about this. Let's do that some more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.